Okay, this lecture is really just a logical extension of expected value. Maximizing expected value just says if you got more than one expected value calculation, you choose the one that's better, right? So there's this rule called the expected value rule, and it says act so as to maximize your expected value. If you got several courses of action, choose the one that's best. It may not be the one that's highest. It depends on what you're after. Maybe if you're interested in minimizing costs, then choosing the best one is the lowest cost. Or if you're interested in maximizing profits, then it's the highest one. So it'll vary by case. Okay, moving on. Again, I assume you've read all this. The two types of insurance are extraordinary and ordinary. Ordinary insurance, basically, it's the stuff you have: car insurance, health insurance, and all that stuff. Extraordinary insurance is interesting. I'm not going to talk about it too much, but if you want one real world example, hedge funds of the sort that high powered investment, actually, a whole bunch of institutions across the United States. University of Hawaii is one example, but the state of Hawaii, almost everyone across the board, big players, to some extent engaged in this. And it was sort of at the root of the 2008 economic crash. It built up what's called a house of cards. One bet based on another type of bet. So it's bets on tops of bets, talking about risk of risks, and then whole thing came collapsing down. Really interesting stuff. If any you're interested, you might want to check out the movie The Big Short, based on a book by Michael Lewis, I think. The book, as always, books are better, but if you want the quick version, you can check that out. And then there's a whole slew of reading. If any of you are really interested, you can email me. I got all kinds of resources that you can check out for where the stuff in this course relates directly to the kinds of things that are basically underlying much of our economy. And even though, in spite of the crash and all things that led to it, the Fed and others and our government didn't insure against this, so a lot of the same players are doing the same types of things that got us to that point of crash. Anyway, the point here is that the two attitudes, risk averse and risk prone, influences correspondingly the probabilities and utilities towards the conservative side on the one hand, and towards the more reckless side on the other hand. Yeah. So if you look at the table, and the homework coming up is going to ask you to do this, the table basically gets at is it tracks the probabilities for each of the situations and the consequences. So if Brady gets a great date, the chances he thinks that occurring, 1 in a million. If you know that song, this is a pretty sad statement, right? But the consequence is bliss, but short-lived. Frady's also a pessimist. The miss, he thinks, is far more likely. He's a pessimist. And correspondingly, if that happens, being a pessimist, everything just falls to crap. So the expected value of going on a date corresponds to the probabilities of each of those events and the utilities. And as you can tell, the one that is outweighed by far is this scenario right here. So you get a small positive value and a strong negative value, negative wins. By contrast, for cocky is as cocky does, right? The chances of a hit, well, the guy's cocky. Oh, 99% she'll go out with me. I'm a handsome guy. He's cocky, right? Consequence, yeah, okay, jackass. Miss, she must be one of those rare birds. She's not into me. Doesn't matter. So when you add it up again, high, massive ego high, plus small, cocky is as cocky does. So the point here is that who's right? Well, our expected value calculations can only calculate given certain assumptions. Those assumptions are governed by attitudes as well as other things. Inductive logic cannot answer who is right. It can only offer estimations given other assumptions. So it gives you a framework for thinking things through dependent upon those other assumptions. Remember from the very beginning of the course, the two ways to critique an argument. One, contest the accuracy of the premises. 2, contest the inference. So the inferences in these cases are fine because inductive logic tracks them. It says, given your assumptions and your frameworks, here's how we're going to track it through. Here are your consequences. Here's how you ought to act. But it doesn't address the other part. Well, how good are your assumptions? Logic can only track inferences and then ask questions about how good your assumptions are. But how good those are left up to other resources, maybe critical thinking, maybe evaluation of your attitudes, any number of other ways to go about that are available. But logic is really interested in the structure of these things. Yeah? So expected value rule tells you to choose the course of action that maximizes expected value. It doesn't take into account these assumptions. It just says let's grant them and see where it goes. So it cannot definitively say who's right and who's wrong. And you might think, what's the point of this? What's its worth? Well, we've got some practical examples coming up, especially in the upcoming second midterm, where you're going to be asked to make a decision based on what you track and then come up with some scenarios. Some scenarios I'll provide for you, and others you're going to have to think through. Given those assumptions, you're going to find that certain things come out. And if you've already prefigured your choice, then you haven't thought things through carefully. That's part of what inductive logic is about. Trying to think things through more carefully, especially for things that may matter. All right, that's it for this lecture.